I'm gonna tell you a story about an ex-girlfriend I had and how much of a pain she had brought into my life. And by the way, when I say pain, I mean that literally. Allow me to explain. Let's call my ex Jane. I was in a relationship with her for 3 months. The first month, there was nothing out of the ordinary. Although, looking back, I do realize now that she hit people a lot when she left. I'm sure you know at least one person who's got a habit of slapping the nearest person around them when they laugh hysterically. Well, Jane was one of those people. I didn't mind that in the beginning. It was actually the opposite. I loved that she got all physical with me when she was really happy. Then a month later, she half moved into my apartment. I'm basically saying that she had her own apartment still, but she spent most of her time in mine. In any case, it was a Saturday, I think, and we were just chilling in the apartment. This was not long after she began living in my apartment, thus we had very little experience of what it's like to be together 24/7. So I was reading a book on the couch when Jane punched my thigh. As a playful gesture, I gently pushed her with my foot and she went, "Really? You wanna go?" And I was like, "Yeah, bimbo, let's do it." Jane got up and began shadow boxing. So then I went in front of her and threw a couple of wide punches. The next second, I'm expecting more playful punches to be thrown, but then I was hammered with a blow that she put all of her weight into it. Look, this girl, she cocked her punch, then threw a solid one right at my face. I seriously thought that she was just kidding. I thought she would power down her punch before it hit, but no, she let me have it like I was threatening her life. I got mad pissed off and I let her know it too. But you know, your girlfriend apologizes and says that it was a mistake. What more can you do? I just let it slip. She was telling me about this boxing class she was attending and how excited she was about getting strong and all. I kinda believed her. What happens for the next few weeks, I won't go into full detail since there's similar incidents to the boxing one. She kicks me in the face while we are both relaxing on the bed, then she says sorry that it was a mistake, blah blah blah. She once nearly put a pen right through my hand, and I ain't exaggerating by the way, I saw a cone-shaped hole on my palm and I had to go to the hospital to get a couple of stitches. But of course, that was also a mistake and she felt truly sorry for it. What broke the camel's back was the incident from the last night of her staying at my apartment. We were both sleeping, at least that's what I thought to be the case at the time, until I had a rude awakening, in a manner of speaking, because I felt the truck hitting my forehead at 100 miles an hour. Worst of all, it wasn't just a single hit. I got hit like 5 times, on my forehead, face, cheek, neck, then on my shoulder. The hits only stopped when I managed to jump off the bed. Then I turned the lights on, saw my face all bloodied up in the mirror on the wall. I just went, "What the fuck? What the fuck is wrong with you, bitch?" She responded, acting like she was all taken aback. "Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I must have been dreaming of something terrible. I should have told you about this. I used to sleepwalk in the past and get violent sometimes. I haven't done this in such a long time. I didn't want to freak you out. I didn't want to ruin what we have." I said to her, "Well, you just did. Get the fuck out of my apartment, bitch." She was weeping and crap, but I didn't buy any of that. I kicked her out of the apartment and told her to never call me again, which she didn't, and that's telling of what really went down. You see, if I were her and the story about sleepwalking and crap were true, then I would have called her and do my utmost to convince her of the truth. But Jane didn't bother with that. She knew the jig was up and didn't want to waste her time trying to get another shot at busting my forehead. She went home and that was it. As for my injuries, I had deep gashes on my forehead and my left cheek. I needed 20 stitches in total to close the wounds, and the doctor tells me they're going to leave a couple of nasty scars. I'm going to need a plastic surgery or 2 to make the scars look less disgusting. I sued Jane for domestic violence, and my attorney will be pursuing additional criminal charges as well. My medical bill is estimated to balloon to tens of thousands of dollars after all the procedures are done. You can bet your ass I won't be paying for them. I'm gonna make sure that Jane will never be able to victimize another innocent person. Back in college, I went out with a guy who was extremely controlling. His name's Elliot, he was 2 years older than me, and regrettably, he was my first boyfriend. Here's how I felt about him in the beginning. Elliot was very clingy and needy. At the time, those qualities of him were actually very attractive to me. The fact that he never wanted to be apart, that he called or texted me throughout the day and night, it made me feel secure in our relationship. You gotta understand, that was my first ever romantic relationship. Yeah, I got started with the whole boyfriend business much later compared to others my age. You add that to the fact that my self-esteem was kinda low, then you might be able to understand why I willingly got myself involved in a rather unhealthy relationship. That being said, Elliot and I were together for about a year. I had to grow up and mature to realize that I had to get out of the relationship. Yeah, I was the one who dumped him. Unfortunately for both of us, Elliot didn't take the breakup all too well. From day one of the breakup, Elliot began calling me dozens of times a day, and when I refused to answer his calls, he sent me hundreds of text messages every single day. Eventually, as he got more desperate, he began to show up in my classrooms and threw tantrums in front of everyone. He got suspended for that. Elliot didn't rest during the 2-week suspension he was serving. 3 times I saw damages on my car. The first time, I saw a long and ugly scratch marks on the driver's side body of the car. The second time was a flat tire. Someone had punctured it with something sharp. And the third one, my headlights were smashed up. I had no evidence. My school has cameras, but not all of them record. What a load of BS. But you know, I didn't need any evidence to know whose doing they were. It was around that time that I began to feel fearful of Elliot. I saw the potential in that he could do far worse than merely damage my car. Thankfully though, I had been granted a period of peace after Elliot had served out the 2-week suspension. He came to school but no longer bothered me with his psychotic antics. That tranquility lasted for about a week. One day after school, I went to the gym as I normally do. I was done with my workout at 6 p.m, so I walked out to the parking lot, hopped inside my car, and began driving home. 5 minutes in, I was driving on a stretch of road that's somewhat isolated when someone jumped out from the backseat and put a knife on my throat. You see, it was already dark by 6 p.m. since it was winter, and I also had a ton of laundry in the back. Add to that the height of my car, which is an SUV, and you can imagine how the rear footwell made the perfect spot to stay hidden. Having said that, Elliot shifted the knife to my stomach, then told me to drive to the old abandoned factory on the outskirts of the town. I knew right there and then that I wasn't going to survive the night if I did as they instructed. So I pretended to cooperate and did my best to calm him down. After 2 to 3 minutes of me being very understanding of him, that seemed to lower his guard. I was approaching the street that I was supposed to make a right at. That was my last chance to get off before heading into the road that essentially has nothing in its surrounding area. I began to lower the speed of the car. I felt the knife had been lowered to the armrest. It was time to make a move. I nearly came to a stop right before making the turn, but instead of driving the car, I opened the door and jumped out of it. My car continued running down the road on its own. I had jumped at around 15 miles an hour, hoping that the forward momentum of the car would give me enough head start to make a run for it. I had made the right choice. I was a good 30 yards away from the car before Elliot jumped out and began to chase after me. I might not be as fast as some of the faster guys, but I could run pretty well. I couldn't widen the gap between me and Elliot, but it couldn't close the distance either. After some 3 minutes of running, a car showed up from the opposite direction and stopped for me as I was waving for help like a lunatic. The driver looked to be in his early 40s, and he didn't hesitate to open the door for me. I told him, "Just step on it. That guy over there has got a knife. Come on, we gotta go." Elliot was only some 2 cars length away from us when the Good Samaritan put the gear in reverse and stepped on the gas. I'm telling you, seeing Elliot chase after us with the knife in his hand, it was like a scene from a horror film. At the end of it all, I was saved by the stranger. Elliot was arrested on the same night, and I came out of the whole thing with a minor sprained ankle, some bruises and cuts. It was a pretty good outcome if you ask me, especially considering that death was the alternative. It took me a while to get back in the dating scene, but I did eventually. My current boyfriend is far from a psycho. He's one of the nicest people I've ever met. So yeah, my story's got a happy ending. I'll be a bit nervous at around the time Elliot is to be released from jail, but I won't let that hamper me. I beat him once, I can do it again if I have to. There was a time in my life when I changed girlfriends more often than most people change their underwear. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but I'm trying to make a point here. I'm not proud of that past, not at all. But if there's one thing that I did right in that period, it's the fact that I never led anyone to think that I was looking for anything serious. The girls that I hooked up with at the time, they all knew I was seeking easy, casual relationships. On that premise, the last girl that I dated with casual intention was Grace. We were together for roughly 10 days, for certain less than 2 weeks. The problem was, she knew what she was getting into, but didn't want it to end at the end. At first, she told me that she was going to harm herself if I dumped her. And when that didn't work, she threatened that she'd rather kill me and herself if I wasn't going to give us another chance. I had similar experiences in the past, nothing happened back then, and so I believed nothing would happen again. I ended up dumping her. 3 days passed when I received the first package from Grace among the many to come. The first package was her feces. The next one was a dead hamster. The third one was also a hamster, but it was killed in a different manner. I don't want to say any more than I have to, you just have to know that it was really bloody. The repulsiveness of the packages escalated with time. Things like a lock of her hair drenched in piss and feces and what was likely her own blood, then a piece of her skin. The rest I'd rather not say. But I mean, after a month of that, I had to get some help from the police. It was on the night of the day that I had received a package containing something that I refused to describe. I went to bed early since I planned to go to the police the first thing in the morning. As I was sleeping, I felt something really hot around my feet. That woke me up and I tried to get up, but my body was all wobbly. Some seconds later, I realized that my house was on fire. I had inhaled a crap ton of smoke from the fire by then. I struggled to stand straight, but I used the bed, a chair next to it, then the wall as leverage, and did my best to get to the bedroom door. After some struggle, I was able to get to the back door, but I fell on the floor before I could get out. The rest of the way, I just crawled on the floor, then onto the backyard, until I was in a relatively safe distance from the fire. Minutes later, half a dozen fire trucks were putting out the fire, but I didn't get to see the end of the fire since I had already been taken to the hospital on an ambulance. I was questioned about the fire when I woke up the next day. I told the investigator about Grace and how I suspected that it was her doing. Days went by and the result of the investigation revealed the presence of accelerant, a huge amount of accelerant. The investigators then acquired Grace's credit card purchase history and were able to connect the arson to Grace. It took a while to arrest her since she had skipped town on the night she set fire to my home, but she was caught eventually. I think Grace is the kind of person who would have gone off on someone eventually. But I recognize my responsibility in this as well. For what it's worth, I stopped regarding sex as some kind of a hobby and people as toys. I trained staying celibate for a full year and didn't start a new relationship for another 2 years. So that's 3 years without sex. After year 3, I began dating a woman, a real good woman. I opened up to her about my past, and thankfully, she chose to help me to become a better man, a better person. We've been together for the last 5 years, and I'll be proposing to her on her birthday next month. The good that I do now cannot absolve me from my past sins. But still, I'm gonna do my darndest to be a good husband, a good father, and an acceptable member of my community. I just pray that my girl will say yes. I was 33 years old when I began dating Brandon. I met him at a business seminar. We worked for different companies, and so we met as complete strangers. Our relationship progressed slowly. I personally wasn't desperate for a boyfriend, and Brandon was overseas for much of the initial 3 months after we had met. That being said, Brandon and I began to see each other almost every day after about month 4. By month 5 of dating, I would say that I spent 5 days out of the week at his place. I only went home to bring clothes and to take care of junk mails. I don't want to judge, but one thing that I found really strange about Brandon was him keeping his mom's cremated ashes in an urn. I don't know if that's a common practice, but to me it felt eerie and uncomfortable. I especially found the whole "I have conversations with my mom's cremated ashes" a bit disturbing. Ellie, my best friend, she actually thought that it was kind of sweet, but not to me. It was always a peculiar sight to see Brandon say good morning and good night to the cremation urn. Even so, I liked Brandon a lot. We had similar interests, we worked in the same field, and we both wanted a family eventually. So right around month 7, it seemed as though our relationship was becoming more serious. We weren't ready to marry yet, but the thought was definitely at the back of our minds. Sadly, however, it all fell apart this one night. I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and saw that Brandon was awake as well. He wasn't sleeping next to me and the bedroom door was ajar. So I was about to go out and head toward the bathroom when I could hear Brandon talking to someone. I put my ear as close to the door as possible without being seen by Brandon, then realized that he was talking to the cremation urn. I was freaked out. Now, it's understandable that you may think I had overreacted. Maybe Brandon's very spiritual and he wants to connect with his mom in any way possible. I get that. However, I don't think you'll be saying the same after you learn of what he had to say to the urn. This is the part that I heard. He said, "But mom, I really love her. I know you think I deserve better, but I promise you, Caroline and I are meant to be together." Don't say that. You know you're always going to be my number one. There's no one who can replace my mommy, not even Caroline. I backed away from the door as soon as I heard that. I had decided that I was going to hold my piss, hope that the hours passed by quickly, then I went back to bed. Some 20 minutes later, Brandon came into the bedroom and he laid next to me. He was trying to spoon, but I moved away as if I was still asleep, but bothered by his touch. Minutes felt like hours and hours felt like days. But no matter how slow, time did pass. I pretended to wake up at 5 a.m. and gave Brandon some ridiculous reason for having to go home so early. You have no idea how scared I was while putting on my clothes and getting ready to go out. When I finally stepped out of his apartment, it felt like I had just escaped from hell. I was so relieved. I called Brandon on the same day and broke up with him over the phone. I had never done that to anyone else in the past, but I was really scared to see him again. I didn't tell him the true reason for breaking up with him. The last thing I wanted was for him to know that I was aware of his creepy conversation time with mommy. Brandon was very adamant about the breakup, but I was a real bitch about it and was able to get him off my tail eventually. I spoke to Ellie about the whole thing and she initially chastised me for being quick to judge. However, I told her to close her eyes and to imagine being in my shoes. Then I retold the story as vividly as one can. By the end of the story, Ellie said that the hairs were standing at the back of her neck. Yeah, quick to judge? My ass. 8 years ago, I was a freshman in college and tragically single. I say that because I hadn't had a girlfriend ever up to that point. I'm like the vanilla of vanillas. I'm just a really bland person, not interesting at all, which probably explains why I was single for so long. With that being said, 2 months into the college life, I met this truly beautiful girl through a friend of mine. We weren't set up on a date or anything like that. It was just one of those hangouts and Kimberly happened to be there. Yeah, the exceptional beauty's name is Kimberly. Anyway, all of us had dinner together, then we went bowling to cap the night. When it was time to go home, for whatever reason, Kimberly asked for my number, and you know what? She was flirting with me. I thought to myself, things like this can actually happen to people like me? Seriously? Well, it did, and of course I gave her my number. After that night, I didn't bother calling Kimberly, which is really telling of my self-confidence at that point in my life. I mean, think about it. The girl sets up everything for you, and you just have to seal the deal, and yet you can't even do that. How pathetic is that? Nevertheless, to my dismay, Kimberly reached out to me a couple of days thereafter and we began dating. The first couple of months, I barely studied and spent most of my time either thinking about Kimberly or spending time with Kimberly. My life revolved around her. Then on our 63rd day of officially being together, yeah, I was counting the dates. I know it's pitiful, but just hear me out. But yeah, on our 63rd day together, Kimberly tells me that she wants to introduce me to her parents. I was like, what? Because it seemed a bit weird after being together for such a short period of time. But I was also happy that she took me so seriously. So yeah, I was like, let's do it, girl. Let's make it official with the family. We drove for 5 hours straight to get to her parents. Their house was in the middle of nowhere. No, correct that. It was not a house, it was a freaking mansion. Huge, old, beautiful, but not without the creepiness that comes with those old properties. Anyway, the first thing I noticed was just how many people it's required to upkeep a household like that. I mean, the first 5 minutes I spent there, I saw the gardeners, the maids, a handyman, chefs, not a chef, chefs, and a butler. I had no clue that our family was so wealthy up to that point. And yeah, talking about our family, they seemed messed up. Here are some words that describe our family: arrogance, callousness, rudeness, bombastic, and I would throw in shallow in there for good measure. Anyhow, the first night we had dinner, I got to meet her brother, sister, grandma, and their parents. When it was time to go to bed, surprisingly, they put me and Kimberly in the same bedroom. Not something that happens often in real life. Regardless, we got it on that night. Come on, it's not every day that a commoner like myself get to spend the night in a mansion. It was amazing. The next day, we spent mostly a boring day. The time was about 4 p.m. when I told Kimberly that we should be getting ready to drive back to our dorms. She told me we'd be leaving at 6, but that before we left, there was something that she wanted me to be a part of. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but boy do I wish she would have never said that. Because the next thing she did was to take me to the basement of the mansion, where weirdly enough, her entire family had gathered. There were the aforementioned members, and as well as some uncles, aunts, cousins, and whatnot. What they did next, I'll keep it brief instead of explaining the entire thing. They were Satan worshippers. They did some disgusting rituals involving animals and bizarre chantings. Believe it or not, I took part in it. Yes, I knew it was wrong, and yes, it disgusted me. but I was so in love with Kimberly that I was willing to worship Satan if that's what it took to have her in my life. Stupid, I know, but hindsight's 2020. And not to mention, don't you remember how horny you were in your early 20s? Them hormones have you by the balls at that age. Fortunately for me, I had a friend who was 1,000 times smarter and far wiser than me. It took lots of convincing on his part, but Robert was persistent, if anything, and he eventually got me to break up with Kimberly. That's not how things end, though, because Kimberly still wants me. After all these years, she's still looking for me. I know this because she finds me every time I move to somewhere else to hide from her. Whatever demon her family worships, I think they believe they need me to be part of it to make it more powerful, I guess. It is so creepy. Whatever they have planned for me, I know it isn't anything good. What kind of lunatics try to have their daughter married to some guy they barely know, and for 8 years at that? That's beyond unreasonable. By the way, before you mention it, I already spoke to the police. They didn't buy anything that I had to say, especially when Kimberly was called in for questioning and she came into the station without protest. They saw her, witnessed firsthand how beautiful she was and how wonderful of a family she hailed from. Oh, you better believe she had them wrapped around her finger. I didn't have to be there to know this. It was written all over the face of the detective. Anyway, I was the bad guy at the end of it all, and they weren't going to do a thing about them evil-worshipping psychos. To be frank, I understand why they can't do anything. It's my word against the family, and Kimberly has played the whole thing very astutely. Going back 8 years, who would have ever imagined that I'd be desperate to get away from a bombshell like Kimberly? I mean, a devil-worshipping bombshell, but a bombshell nonetheless. Sometimes I wonder if I should just give in. That's how beautiful she is. But nah, I'm good. They'll have to give up on me eventually. At least, I hope they will.